We have all heard Snow White's story before, and it's still a good one, that it's not necessary that Snow White was always beautiful. There were many other things that happened to her, like meeting the seven dwarfs. In every story, the dwarfs helped Snow White, but how did they do it? What if we change some parts of Snow White's story and the story of these seven dwarfs? So, without making you wait any longer, let's listen to another Snow White story. In the start of movie, a fairy tale world is shown, where there were princes, queens, dragons, and more. In this island, there were seven brave boys, known as the Fearless Seven, or F7. Whenever the kingdom faced trouble, everyone would call for the F7. Today was one of those days. There was a huge dragon in the dragon was causing chaos in the kingdom. The warriors fought against the dragon and rescued a queen's baby. When these warriors saw the princess, they thought the princess didn't look like that at all. This made them suspicious, so they decided to attack the prince. But it turns out that the princess wasn't actually a princess, but a fairy in disguise. Because of this, the fairy curses the seven warriors, turning them into dwarfs. The curse will only be broken when the most beautiful girl in the kingdom kisses them. The story continues as we see a witch named Regina in a castle. She is near a magical tree in her palace. When sunlight hits the magical tree, the apples on the tree transform into magical shoes. Regina takes these shoes and wears them. For a few seconds, she transforms into a very beautiful princess. But as soon as the magic of the shoes fades, the witch returns to her original appearance, looking just as she did before. Regina becomes very angry because of this. Then, we see a night scene where it's revealed that the princess actually belongs to Snow White, who doesn't live in this castle. Snow White secretly sneaks into the castle. She is a very kind and good-hearted girl, but a bit chubby. After sneaking into the castle, she starts searching for something. She goes to her father's room, the king's room, and finds one of his books. It's revealed that the king no longer lives in this castle, and Snow White is searching for her father. Snow White finds a book belonging to her father, and inside it, his story is written. We learn that Snow White is 18 years old. It's also revealed that there is a witch in the kingdom who is casting spells on everyone. When this witch is brought before the king, instead of punishing her, the king falls madly in love with her. The king becomes so enchanted by the witch that he marries her. The witch brings a special tree with her, and inside it is a mirror. As time passes, the mirror grows larger and more powerful. Eventually, the king realizes that this queen is actually a witch, and she could be a danger to everyone. To protect Snow White, he sends her far away from the castle, where she can be safe. At the end of the diary, it is also written that the Fearless Seven, F7, can help her. It was also written that no matter what happens, you should never trust the apples. We see that Snow White is still in the castle, and it is now morning. In front of her is the same magical tree, where sunlight is shining on the apples. By the time Regina arrives, Snow White has already put on the magical shoes made from the apples on the tree. Regina doesn't recognize Snow White, and, seeing such a beautiful girl in front of her, orders her to be captured. However, Snow White somehow manages to escape by flying away to a magical broom. Regina goes to the tree that has always told her what to do and who the most beautiful person in the world is. The mirror then shows Snow White's picture. Regina asks where Snow White is now, and the mirror tells her that she is with a prince who can help her. The story continues, and both characters shift to the seven dwarfs, who once looked like handsome young men. Now, feeling troubled by their appearance, they often wonder how they can return to their former selves. At that moment, they see a girl walking towards the house, and they mistakenly believe she is a witch. However, once they reach home and see how beautiful she is, they all become quiet. The seven dwarfs decide to impress Snow White in different ways. The dwarfs keep trying tricks to impress Snow White, because if she kisses any of them, their curse will be broken. When Snow White looks in the mirror for the first time, she realizes that her beauty comes from the magical shoes. She doesn't tell them her real name or that she is the princess. Instead, she says her name is Red Shoes. She explains that she is here to find the F7, who will surely help her find her father. One of them warns all her friends not to let her know they are the F7, because if she discovers who they are, she might not like them anymore. They tell Red Shoes that they will definitely help her find her father. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a prince in the kingdom who wants the most beautiful princess to attend his birthday party. Regina soon reaches Prince with a picture of Snow White. She says that if they want to meet the most beautiful girl, Regina tells the prince to find the girl, as it will benefit both of them. The prince wants Snow White, so he circulates posters throughout the kingdom. That night, Snow White creates a poster for her father to help her find him quickly. At that moment, she starts hearing some sounds coming from the forest, so she ventures into the woods. Meanwhile, someone begins to follow her. The creature had never been seen in its true form before, so it would always transform when someone spotted it. In the forest, a large rabbit started chasing Snow White. Merlin arrives to save her and tells her to leave without looking back, promising to handle the rabbit. However, Snow White becomes worried about him and decides to turn back. When someone sees Merlin, he quickly transforms back, causing his powers to weaken. In the meantime, the creature reaches them and starts fighting with Merlin. However, the other warriors arrive just in time to help defeat the creature and take it with them. They form a plan on how to find Snow White's father. Meanwhile, Snow White reaches the kingdom and gives posters of her missing father everywhere. She asks people if they have seen him. During this time, she also discovers that there are missing posters of herself. As she realizes this, the guards spot her and begin to chase after her. Snow White takes off her shoes to protect herself, causing the guards not to recognize her. At this moment, Merlin and Arthur arrive, but they ignore Snow White when she asks for help. However, Merlin eventually comes back alone. Using his powers, he defeats the guards who were bothering Snow White and tells her to run for her life. Snow White is still in her true form. She feels happy to know that a true warrior like Merlin is there to help her. Snow White puts her shoes back on and steps outside again, but the guards recognize her and start chasing her once more. Meanwhile, a big fight happens between the F7 and the prince's army, which is very intense. During the fight, House get badly damaged. The prince tells Snow White that he will come back for her. Snow White begins to feel attracted to the Merlin, but she struggles with her feelings. She wonders if she can trust him and if he will really return. In the meantime, the Merlin and their friends do everything they can to protect her, and they all prepare to face this new danger together. Snow White started to develop feelings for Merlin, especially liking him a lot. One night, they talked for a long time, and Snow White asked Merlin what it means to have a beautiful girl in his life. Merlin replied that he doesn't look like himself and that she would understand if she saw his real form. Merlin then told Snow White to close her eyes and imagine what he described. However, Snow White interrupted and said that no matter how he looks, he is still a green dwarf and she likes him. Snow White wanted to tell Merlin about the magical red shoes, so she tried to take them off. Despite her efforts, the shoes wouldn't come off. When the prince returned to Regina without Snow White, Regina became very upset and confronted the prince. Regina gives the prince a poisoned apple. As soon as the prince eats it, he transforms into a creature, and all the other people with him also turn into monsters. Meanwhile, Snow White and her friends work together to fix their home again. To help Snow White find her father, Merlin creates many copies of him to distribute the posters. They even created a plane and dropped many posters throughout the kingdom. Merlin believed that Snow White was his true love, so he imagined himself in his real form with her. They sat together, sharing their feelings like they were in their true forms. However, Merlin still hadn't transformed. At that moment, the prince arrived with his army. The tree monsters attacked both of them. Merlin told Snow White not to look at him. He fought off the tree monsters, that he breaks the large tree and knocks down all the monsters. And Snow White turns around. The prince transforms back into his old form, becoming a dwarf again. At that moment, a wooden monster jumps into the water with Merlin. Snow White, not caring about her own safety, jumps in after them. There, she realizes that a large rock has fallen on Merlin. She tries to lift the rock, but struggles. At that moment, she needs power, so she takes off her magical shoes to reveal her real form. Now that Snow White is in her true form, she tells Merlin everything. Merlin is upset about all this. For a moment, he thinks about leaving Snow White and going away. When Snow White falls asleep, Merlin heads into the forest, talking to himself. Snow White realizes that she loves him for who he truly is, not just for his prince-like appearance. She has always seen the inner beauty. Merlin remembers every moment he spent with Snow White. Snow White puts on her red shoes and decides to leave, thinking that maybe Merlin won't return. Suddenly, she sees Merlin, who offers her an apple to eat. Just as she is about to take a bite, the real Merlin arrives. He reveals that he is not Merlin, but the witch Regina, who has come here. Regina takes Snow White away, leaving Merlin behind. He goes to the castle and tells the small gods to inform the others. They all grab their weapons and head to the castle. Inside, Regina tortures Snow White, forcing her to eat an apple. If Snow White doesn't eat it, Regina threatens to kill Merlin. Reluctantly, Snow White eats the poisoned apple and falls unconscious. After that, the mirror tells them that in 3 days, Snow White will be trapped in a tree until sunlight touches her. The poisoned apple will turn into red shoes, and after that, Snow White will die. Merlin uses his powers to free him from the tree. Just then, the entire team arrives. They save Merlin and break the mirror. Regina attacks Merlin, but she falls off a cliff. Everyone thinks Merlin won't survive because he was badly injured. When the witch left, her magic also ended. The wooden figure was actually the Snow White father. Snow White is very happy to see her father outside. They all learn that Merlin has fallen and is believed to be dead, but then Merlin is brought back up. Snow White hugs him tightly and kisses him, expressing her love. At that moment, Merlin wakes up and returns to his true form. He apologizes to Snow White for his earlier behavior. In the movie's last scene, we see that the other 6 dwarfs have also fallen in love with different girls, no longer just chasing after beautiful girls. This amazing movie ends here. I'd love to hear what you thought of Snow White. Let's meet again for the next movie, but before, kindly subscribe to my channel. Until then, goodbye.